The Hurricanes' misfortunes in net have continued, and unfortunately, Antti Raanta has been placed on waivers as a result of it. And now the Hurricanes have officially entered the goaltending market. So in this video, we're going to talk about some possible scenarios, trade packages, and trade targets for the Hurricanes to shore up between the pipes. So the NHL trade freeze is right around the corner, which will take place from the 20th of December to the 28th of December. So I don't think we see a deal get done by then. I do think that it's a possibility, but I doubt it. However, indications that there will be a move are already starting to be made. First and most unfortunate aspect of this, Antti Raanta has been placed on waivers. Now, I don't know where this leads. I don't know if he stays with the team and assumes the role of a third goaltender in the event that he's not claimed. He may or may not report to the minors because a player with this much tenure may not want to be in the American League riding buses. Plus, the guy has a family. This potentially could be the end of the road for him. And as my buddy Griff said earlier in one of his tweets, some athletes get to end their career on their terms, but sometimes your career gets ended on its terms. So, I hope this is not the end of the road for Father Finn. It's a distinct possibility. Now, maybe he does accept going down to the minors for a little bit if the Hurricanes can find someone to loan him out to, and he can potentially rediscover his game if he chooses to do that. But the goaltending has been an undeniable issue ever since Freddy Anderson went down with the blood clotting issue. And if the Hurricanes are really going to get serious about winning this year, they're going to have to make a move between the pipes. The Hurricanes don't have any back-to-back games for, I believe, the next 10 days. So one good thing that can come of this is Petz, while he is expected to be called up according to Kevin Weeks here, that doesn't necessarily mean that he's going to be needed in the rotation and that Kochetkov will probably be holding down the fort until such time as a move gets made. Additionally, ECHL Norfolk has called up Sean Kelly, and as aforementioned, it looks like the Hurricanes are inevitably, if not already, entering the goaltending market, and Don Waddell is probably already working the phones to try and work out a deal, maybe get a handshake agreement in place and get it done after the trade freeze. But the Hurricanes are entering some slightly dangerous territory with what they're dealing with right now, and I'm confident that Don Waddell, who has done mostly good things since he's been in office, I'm very confident that he would not have placed Antti Raanta on waivers unless he had a plan in place to make sure Petz is not going to enter the rotation. Petz is going to be a good goalie. He is, but he is not ready. Additionally, Pyotr Kochetkov, I feel like we've seen lately what he's capable of, but he's not there yet. Now, one thing to keep in mind as I go into what goalies that the Hurricanes could potentially target and trade, the projected cap space here is a very important thing to keep in mind, as one of these goaltenders, and those of you who have watched my channel quite frequently and who really follow the team as well, probably already know who the first one I'm going to discuss is. Some of these goalies have a pretty high cap hit, and the Hurricanes don't have a ton of cap space at the moment. They can move for a goalie before the trade deadline. They're projected to have just over $8 million of cap space, but this cannot wait. So here's some other things that we have to keep in mind. Freddy Anderson has not yet been placed on LTIR, so the team apparently has not totally given up hope on him coming back. I don't want to give up hope on it either, but blood clotting issues are serious and potentially life-threatening. In fact, Brendan Moore was asked about it, and he gave a response that would not be indicative of whether they're expecting him to come back or not. I hope he gets better. He needs to prioritize his health, but I don't see him coming back, at least not this season. I'm not a doctor, but that's just what I think. So the one thing here that the Hurricanes would have to utilize is that they can place Freddy Anderson on LTIR retroactive to the date that he played his last game, which will clear up more cap space. Now, will it be enough for the first goaltender I'm going to highlight? Maybe not, but very important thing to keep in mind. Not to mention, cap space will be a factor in whatever potential trade package the Hurricanes could put together to be able to acquire a goaltender, have enough cap space, maybe get the other team to retain salary, maybe a pick, maybe a prospect. Now, just to drive home one more time that this is a goaltending issue, and I do believe that there's also a team defense issue, but I believe that the team defense is a direct result of them not having a whole lot of confidence in what's going on behind them. Now, this information is a few days old, but it's still mostly relevant. Hurricanes are 6th overall in the National Hockey League in expected goals against per 60, best in the NHL on shots allowed per game with 25.11, high danger shots against 89, which is the 10th best in the NHL, and I have a feeling that that's going to improve Sportsnet put this out. First in offensive zone possession time against, expected goals against tied for second place, scoring chances against second place, slot passes against 12.1 per game, which is second, and when the Hurricanes are playing to their standards, other teams don't get much to the middle of the ice, so I'm impressed to see that that's still there. And then where it completely differentiates, goals saved above expected per 60, the Hurricanes are dead last. So yes, make no mistake, in large part it is a result of the goaltending. So it's time to fix it. Another thing to keep in mind when players typically adapt to new systems, a lot of times goalies have a harder time adapting than defensemen and especially forwards. So the sooner they get a goaltender and they can get used to Carolina Hurricanes hockey, the better for the goaltender that would theoretically be getting acquired, and also better for the team because it is a noticeable difference when this team plays with confidence with their netminder. There's no hesitation in their game. And then there's what went on when they played against Nashville last night, which in the second and the third period in particular, I could just see this gradual fall off and jump in the team, and eventually the confidence totally went away when Raanta lets him in. Did he get help in every single one of them? Absolutely not. But when the Carolina Hurricanes score that much, a team that prides itself on airtight defense, forechecking, and winning low-scoring games, the goalie's got to move the needle the rest of the way. Not to mention that's why you have two goaltenders to go on back-to-back nights. So yes, they did get in late. And yes, they were probably wore out from a really long, arduous, and aggravating road trip. But that's one where the goaltender has to carry the team the rest of the way. And unfortunately, Antti didn't do it. That made it all the more apparent that these changes need to happen. So now I'm going to go into some of the potential goaltending targets. This is not all of them by any means. Some of these may be a little unrealistic, and some of these may not be available at all. We'll see in the coming days what develops. So this is the most coveted goalie that could potentially be on the market, in that of John Gibson. I don't know how he feels about being in Anaheim right now, but I'm sure it's not too much different from when he stated something a couple of seasons ago about how he wanted out of there. The reason I have the information displayed here in the manner in which I do, I'm not a goalie expert, but this is going to be my way of analyzing how I think the Hurricanes should go about acquiring one. You'll notice biographic information, most importantly their size and their age, and comparing their current numbers to their career numbers, because some of these guys have been on good teams before and now they're on bad ones, and vice versa, or they may be on a team that's very dependent on how much they can score and doesn't have a whole lot of defense in front of it. In the case of Anaheim, they're young, they're rebuilding, they're probably going to build around their center depth. It's going to be a few years before they're really, really going again, but I think once they get there, they're going to be really good. And despite how bad Anaheim is, John Gibson is maintaining a goals against average this season that is similar to the one of his career. As a matter of fact, it's only off by 0.6 of a point. Additionally, his save percentage, despite being on a pretty bad team, is still around his career average of .905. Now, another thing Carolina might want to look for in a goalie is a decent amount of playoff experience, and John Gibson has 26 playoff games under his belt. Currently, the Anaheim Ducks are dead last in the Pacific Division, and I really don't think John Gibson is going to be finishing his season in Anaheim. Now, there's some big things that complicate a trade like this potentially getting made. One, John Gibson has a $6.4 million cap hit. The Hurricanes do not have space for that unless they move somebody out. The Ducks retain some salary, which I do not think that they would do. He has a 10-team no-trade clause, so he may or may not want to come to Carolina. If he's concerned with getting on a team that has really good defense that's going to get back to its game, Carolina could be a prime stop for him. You have someone who is incredibly consistent, but can also make timely saves. Looking at his numbers here when he's on this really bad team, I think that he would ultimately be a good fit, but he would be the hardest one to acquire. Not to mention one of our biggest trade pieces in that of Brett Pesce has a 15-team no-trade clause himself, so it would also be dependent on if he wants to go to Anaheim. I don't know if they would take a hard look at Natchez. Anaheim, with the way that they play, having someone like Natchez to play with Zegras, Carlson, Troy Terry, and the like, he could potentially be a good fit there. He's an RFA with no trade protection. The one other downside of acquiring Gibson from a roster standpoint, it's not going to take you this season plus 3 more to determine whether Kochekov is going to be the starter or not. Goaltending depth can get depleted really quick, but it can also become a logjam really quick because it's the least populated position on the depth chart. So that's another thing that would have to be kept in mind there if the Hurricanes were to potentially acquire John Gibson. this would be, I think, the best fit for the Carolina Hurricanes. The problem here is the amount that Carolina would probably have to give up to get him. It would be 2 roster players and probably some futures. And to be able to fit him underneath the cap might end up actually being more trouble than it's worth. So I believe that this is the best goalie available, but would be the most difficult to acquire. And if it doesn't work out, it would have the most negative long-term effect on the Hurricanes roster. So from here, we start getting into potential trade options that are a little bit more friendly towards the Hurricanes in terms of the cap hit and the term. So I'm going to highlight both goalies from Arizona, starting off with Connor Ingram. So the Coyotes are currently sitting in the second wildcard spot in the Western Conference, so they might not give either one of their goalies up. But they're also looking to make improvements elsewhere in their lineup. They could potentially want Necas or Pesce, which I think are the 2 biggest trade pieces right now. I would hold on to Drury, considering how well he has played recently and has shown a ton of improvement, especially in the last few weeks. Connor Ingram is right about where you would want as far as the baseline for numbers. Goals against average this season of 2.41. Anything below 3 would be great for the Hurricanes. Anything below 2.5 would be really good. Save percentage of 9.23, which would be a drastic improvement right out of the gate. Career total of 49 games. And the goals against average is just above 3. It helps the rest of the team in front of him get some confidence back. He could potentially put up much better numbers in Carolina. So the one good thing here, if the Hurricanes decided not to place Freddy Anderson and not move any roster players back, the Hurricanes would be right at the cap ceiling if they could make it work, get Arizona to retain maybe a little bit of salary, and be able to fit Connor Ingram underneath the cap, and potentially maybe only give up futures to do so, and still leave the door open for Freddie to return if he's not placed on LTIR. Now, if Freddy Anderson does go to LTIR, which I think is, at that point, you can start looking at potentially making a really big package deal here. The Hurricanes need another center, preferably a right-handed center, and if you could find a way to make it work, if you could get Nick Schmaltz at the same time along with Connor Ingram, that would be probably the best thing the Hurricanes could do. That being said, that's a pipe dream. I do not think the Arizona Coyotes would give up Nick Schmaltz, but I think he would be a great fit for the Hurricanes, but that's a story for another video. Now, in much the same vein, we're going to talk about Carill Vela. If you remember last year, he absolutely stood on his head when Arizona visited Raleigh. He put on an impressive performance, and that was one of the first times I really sat down and watched Carill Vela, and I was like, damn, this kid's good. Considering his goals against average hovers around 3.5, be it this season or throughout his career, and his save percentage sits just under 900. If he's on a Hurricanes team playing to their standards and playing confident hockey, I think those numbers skyrocket with Carill Vela. You would run into a similar problem with trying to acquire Carill Vela that you would with John Gibson in terms of fitting him underneath the salary cap if Freddy Anderson is not on LTIR. However, it's not as much of a difference. With a cap hit of $2.725 million, you could move one contract out or maybe get Arizona to retain salary, but they're definitely going to want something in return for that. They're going to want picks or a prospect or something to incentivize them to retain salary. The one slightly irregular thing about Carill Vela, he's a full right goalie, so he wears the trapper on the right hand. It's just full right goalies are, kind of rare. No playoff experience, but Arizona, he's shown he's a very capable goaltender, and I think if the Hurricanes could not acquire John Gibson or Connor Ingram, this would also be a great option. As a matter of fact, just from the sample size I've seen of Carill Vela, despite the numbers, I would rather get Carill Vela than Connor Ingram in terms of which goalie I would like to have more between the two of them. However, Connor Ingram would be better. Connor Ingram will be easier in terms of someone who will fit into the salary cap structure without the Hurricanes having to get them to retain any salary or giving up too many assets to get him. Same thing goes if you move out a combination of Necas and Pesce, for example, and could get Nick Schmaltz in the return as well. But again, probably not very realistic. That is my dream trade right now, though. Either goalie from Arizona and Nick Schmaltz, and I think that you elevate the Hurricanes back to contender status within a few weeks once the new players adapt. All right, guys, so that's going to be it for this video, but this will not be the end of me profiling goaltenders unless the Hurricanes make a trade and ultimately render this topic of discussion irrelevant. So in my next video, or maybe a series of videos regarding this topic so long as it is relevant, I will also be discussing Mackenzie Blackwood, Capo Kakkonen, whom are both from San Jose, UC Soros from Nashville, who I think is very unlikely, but I'll talk about it anyway. Jake Allen in Montreal, who I also think is unlikely and not the best target. And other possibilities that may not be as good but are still feasible in that of familiar faces Alex Lyon and Peter Mrazek. And potentially Elvis Merzlikins, but I'm not entirely sure Columbus would let him go, even though it sounds like that they have completely opened themselves up to the trade market with how their season is going. And for all we know, everybody except for Adam Fantilli might be on the table in Columbus. I hope you guys enjoyed that video. If you did, please like, comment, share, and subscribe. And also, please consider donating to my Buy Me a Coffee. The link will be in the description. I look forward to following up on this one. Thank you very much. Y'all take care, and I'll see you next time.